Welcome to the Purple Rock Survivor podcast. I am John, my co-host is Andy, and we are talking about the finale of Survivor Game Changers. Kings have been slain, queens have been slain, war crimes were committed, and at last we have crowned a winner. But before we talk about that winner, Andy, let's talk about one of those slain queens.
That sounds violent. But that's appropriate for advantage again. People were pretty worked up about that when it happened, huh?
Yeah, I saw a lot of torches and pitchforks out there.
What was your reaction? Did you feel like this was just, like super unfair, a dereliction of duty by the show, or was it just kind of unfortunate?
I mean, it was funny because people have been predicting that this could happen for weeks because all these advantages were out there still. The thing is, it just practically didn't seem to make much sense, but once the pieces started moving, it seemed pretty obvious what was going to happen. And, they just had a situation where with 6 people left, 5 could become immune, and that's exactly what happened. There's not a whole lot else that they could have done there.
Yeah, I'll say, I'll forgive people in the moment for getting heated. Good for you. Good for you that you still have some emotional attachment to the season and that, you experience the drama of the show this way. I tend to be a little more dispassionate in the moment. But hopefully, and probably maybe very likely, given that we're recording this even later than we usually do, I would hope most people are kind of like, you know what, maybe the show didn't screw everything up and this isn't a representation of a complete failure. It just is what it is, a lot of people are like, how could she go home without getting any votes on her? The answer is, well, because she wasn't immune. Everybody else was immune. What are you going to do?
Yeah, they could have made them actually vote and then she would have had votes on her. It's not that different.
Yeah, and then if you're like, oh, they should take away the immunity. That's the whole freaking point of immunity.
Right.
There's no takebacks on this.
No backsies.
So, yeah, it's just like, yeah. And well, she couldn't do anything. Well, she could have been immune. Yeah, everybody else found a way, and, it's unfortunate that she couldn't, but the immunities, as much as a lot of people would rather them not, they sometimes matter. Idols sometimes actually matter, and having them and playing them at the right time is actually a good thing in Survivor. And, it is what it is. Obviously, I don't want to see Suri go out like that. I don't know how excited I would have been to see her go out in other ways. And I will say a lot of people who are probably like, this is unfair that it happens to Suri. I don't feel like they were like, it should have been Aubrey. Because, it should have been Aubrey.
It could have been Aubrey.
If, one person, the person who deserved their immunity the least is her.
Oh, you're saying that she didn't deserve Ty's friendship and support?
I'm saying that she's the only one there who didn't, get immunity in some other way. She was just granted it. Now, again, that's also perfectly fine. That's how it works. Ty made her immune. So, that's still his immunity. So, yeah, it's unfortunate. And I think it's led to a lot of people wanting to fix the situation. Obviously, some, I guess, retroactively, but most people for the future. And I do worry, and I tweeted this out, that it's kind of like when the baseball's All-Star game had a tie once, and everybody got so mad. Because baseball games can't end in ties. That's not the way baseball is. Tradition, rah, rah, rah. How dare we mar the integrity of this exhibition game? And so they, took it seriously. And they were like, okay, this time it's for real. And they made, the All-Star game decide which league gets home field advantage in the World Series. Because it's now people will try. And they'll really take it seriously, and managers will, keep their relievers or blah, blah, blah. And it turns out, no, that was stupid. This thing didn't need to be fixed. It was played 100 times and there was one tie. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at here. This was such a crazy convergence of, just flukes that I don't think it shows that there's, something wrong with Survivor. I don't even think it shows that there was something wrong with this season. A lot of people feel this is what happens when you have so many. There really weren't that many idols this season.
I think you're on the right track here. What generally would prevent this from happening again is just overwhelming odds. It was extremely unlikely to happen this time. It'd be extremely unlikely to happen again. If it did happen again, maybe you look into changing it, because it really shouldn't happen, as you said, more than one time out of 50.
Yeah, look at everything that had to happen for this to come together. First off, none of the pre-merge idols had to be played. That's the thing. Like, man, people say there's too many idols this season. None of them showed up. Like, the last idol to be found in this season was like the first day of the second swap. Otherwise, they've just been sitting there. Like, frankly, like last year's idol that Adam found in like the last minute of the game before it could be played, that's more suspect than this. The idol that Natalie Anderson found that, you know, we all thought was long since past, gone, that was more suspect than this. This is just what happened was the guys who found the idols didn't need to play them. And frankly, you know, and it shows how more fluky it is. We've had at least 2 podcasts where we're like, can you believe that Ty didn't play an idol?
Yeah, exactly. There were certainly situations where it seemed like, oh my God, Ty, play your idol. Are you insane? And he held on to 2 of them.
Yeah. So that, you know, just that 3 idols, because frankly, they would have whittled those idols down, the 3, because they had 3 tribes, but they just weren't played. So that's one thing. The next one is that Ty, after holding on to them forever, decides now's the time to play both of them. That's a fluke. The next fluke is the fact that the non-idol holder won immunity. It could have just been that Ty won immunity, and then, you know, there's plenty of people that would have been available to be voted out. That the one of the few people who either did not have an idol or didn't end up being protected by an idol, in Aubrey's case, was the immunity holder. That's, you know, a long odds thing. That Troy decided to play it now when he had fully intended to play it in Final 5. That's unusual. And then the legacy advantage, that the person who had the legacy advantage actually had to play it. We thought that was pretty unlikely, like what the math was that on. Now, apparently, I think it's probably 20%, you know, because it's Final 6. But, you know, all of this stuff had to converge for this to happen. And it's just kind of like, wow, that was weird.
Yeah, and as you said, it's probably not going to happen again. So why bother going out of your way to plot some elaborate change for it? Just play the odds. It won't happen again, hopefully. It does suck that Suri went out this way. I mean, particularly because it's Suri. I think that's really, like you said, you were kind of implying that the outrage was partly because it was Suri. Yeah, I mean, that's justified. Suri is great. It really does feel worse because we lost Suri this way. If it had been, you know, we lost Troy,
we'd be laughing our asses off.
Yeah.
And there'd be some people would be like, I guess that isn't quite fair, but who cares?
Right, exactly. I'd be like, oh, well, you know, that does suck for Troy because he never had a vote against him, but meh, he wasn't going to win anyway. You know, it's different because it's Suri, and it does sting a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's the final long odds percentage of all of this. That all of this converged to get rid of somebody that A, was doing really well, and B, that is beloved. Now, I think maybe part of the reasons why, you know, the sting wasn't as acute for us is I still don't think she was ever going to get to the end. So, you know, it's like, that's a sucky way to go out, but she was going to get taken out.
So, well, if you look at the way that the votes actually played out in that tribal council, if they had been read and so many immunities weren't in play, Suri was going to advance from that tribal council. She had a voting block of 3 that had voted against Sarah. So it's, you know, again, really long odds that Suri would make it to final tribal council, but you can't rule it out. She was at least going to make Final 5.
Oh, yeah, no, she was going to make the Final 5 because nobody had any intention of voting her out just yet because you can get her at 4. And, yeah, I think a lot of people, because, you know, our fans are just lovely people, and God bless them all, been like, oh, maybe they're going to underestimate her all the way. She got a standing ovation on her way out. People were well aware of what Suri was and what Suri meant to this show. I don't think many people were looking to take her to the end. But, yeah, I don't think Aubrey. Do you think Aubrey doesn't know that Suri's a threat? Yeah, I think Brad didn't have any intention to take her there. He didn't have any intention to take anybody but, you know, Troy.
Well, but
so,
see,
yeah.
that's the nice thing, though, is that her making it to 5, there's a bunch of people that don't necessarily want to take her to the end, but Brad and Troy might be like, oh, crap, Aubrey and Ty won't take us to the end, and vice versa, and Suri can say, hey, I'll be your swing vote, and suddenly Suri is that much closer to Final 5, or Final 3.
Yes, that's true. But and I will say one thing that they could do is they could just get rid of the legacy advantage. I think this season actually like played out almost perfectly for the legacy advantage. It was passed off in an incredibly dramatic way that we are going to talk about probably multiple times this episode. It saved the person. It was useful. It still isn't worth the trouble. It isn't worth, having one more immunity out there for something that can only impact the game in like 3 episodes.
Yeah, and we discussed all the issues with it when it was first introduced and when it was played last season, and then when it was reintroduced this season. It's not good TV. The fact that it was successful this time does not somehow validate its existence. I'm fine with it never coming back.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that it was successful helps prove our theory. That, this is as good as it's ever going to get for the legacy advantage. I suppose the only other way it could be interesting is if it, passes down a few times. But, this was, it was a huge moment for these things, and still, it's whatever. You can lose it. It's not worth what it ended up doing at Final 6. Mostly because it's, and they tried to introduce choices this season, but it's not really a choice. If you need it once, you play it once. If you don't need it, you don't even get to think about it for a long time. And for Sarah, there was no choice. In fact, it sounded like she almost got blindsided. It sounds like she said that when she did play it, I don't really need to play this, but I'm going to. That part got edited out. So, which illustrates, because she didn't have to choose. This is literally the only time you can play it, so go ahead. Right. It's not even the last time.
Had it been a regular immunity idol, maybe she sits on it and she gets voted out.
Exactly. So, yeah, that's one you could get rid of if they're looking for, we should avoid this. But everything else, just sometimes weird things happen if enough scenarios play out over time. I wouldn't get too worried about it, and I certainly wouldn't be looking to make sweeping changes to fix a problem that probably doesn't exist. Obviously people were bummed that it took out Suri. I still never think that she was going to get past 4. You can lay out a good case, and obviously until we see it happen, and, I think people have done a good job showing that she's never voted out in normal ways in this show.
Yes.
But it's time to put a bow on Suri's Survivor experience, perhaps for the last time. So what do you think was her defining Survivor moment through 4 seasons?
Quick preamble before we even get to that. It's just, those of you that have watched Suri's 4 seasons, just think of how amazing this is. Suri was so close to being the first boot in Panama, her first season. She was on the older woman tribe. She was the only woman of color. She was afraid of leaves. She somehow survives that vote. And if she doesn't, she goes home. She's the first boot. No one ever thinks about her again. No one ever realizes what a legend she is.
Frankly, we probably talk about, what was the show doing casting her in the first place?
Yeah, she's afraid of leaves. What a joke. Who is this woman? Why'd she even bother? And, from that beginning, goes on to become this. And
second most days played ever in Survivor, and I bet if you look over the stats, probably the most games played in the actual game of Survivor, and not that weird side island of fishing and challenges. The least amount of votes ever cast for somebody who's been around a lot.
Yeah, and just an amazing string of performances that she's had. Heroes vs. Villains was her worst performance, and she was still pretty good.
I think she's easily one of the best players ever, and I don't think you have to couch it with best to never win, because I think I think we've seen, especially recently, that winning just sometimes happens, and it might be a faulty way of judging ability in Survivor, because such strange. Look at how she exited this game. So many strange things go one way or another, and that's how we'd be like, oh, this person isn't good because it took them so many times to win, or they never won in so many times, or this person is great because they won on their first time. Now, I think the evidence is there. We have the data over a longer string of time to suggest, win or lose, she is one of the best players of all time. And by I mean you can go top 5 if you want to. I would listen to arguments to top, 2. I don't know if I could get past 1, but
Yeah, I was gonna say I think you could get down to top 3, and then you're getting dicier. But you can't. No one's gonna argue that she's not a legend. For her single defining moment, though, I would pick getting Eric to give up his idol.
Yeah, that's a easy and good choice.
Yeah.
I didn't go with that one simply because it's a moment she shares, but I do think she deserves a lot of the credit for the formation of the idea even. And it kind of leads into my pick, which is 3-2-1 in Panama. And the reason why I think both are such great defining Suri moments are that it shows what a creative thinker she is.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't, those plans were not drawn up before. It's not like she's borrowing something that she's seen from the show before. Those were completely original ideas that she had that were successful.
On the spot ideas too, this isn't like I came in planning to do all of this stuff. And what I like about the Panama 3-2-1 is because as Panama was going on at that point, she's already I imagine most everybody's favorite player of the season, and it's largely because we like who she is. And she's playing well, she's doing well for herself, but in that moment we see that she's a gamer and, like I said, a creative thinker, because it's not just figuring out that you actually don't always need a majority to get rid of somebody in Survivor. You just need a plurality, which, sounds like it's a simple idea, except that it really wasn't something that people ever factored in at that point. Like since Borneo, maybe, when they weren't really factoring in, my vote
Anything.
will pair with other people's vote to get rid of people. It's just pluralities ended up happening that way. But after that, everybody kind of wanted majorities. My numbers versus your numbers. And to break from that, and this is like a pre-idol universe for a lot of that, is just like, no, they don't need the security. She didn't need to do that. She's like, look, if I can just convince these people to split their votes, then the votes I have now are enough. I don't need to go again anymore. So just that alone, and frankly, a lot of people still won't do that because, I don't know, I guess there's comfort in majorities. And then the other thing is that the reason why she did that is the recognition that somebody who is a GOAT, most people would be like, no, you can vote out of Courtney. I want to go to the end with her. It's like, that's great if you're the person deciding. Otherwise, she's taking your spot. And that's what Suri recognized, that Courtney will keep me out of the finals, so she's got to go. And not enough people do that.
Yeah, I mean, and it was just, it seems like such an obvious thing in hindsight. Like, well, yeah, obviously, of course she wouldn't want to do that. But people generally didn't think that way. And Suri she's good enough at evaluating herself to know, okay, when we get down to the end, if it's somehow a final three, I'm probably not going to win the last challenge. Challenges are not my strength. So instead, what I'm going to do is set up a situation where there are people that you wouldn't want. It's almost like she was forming a meat shield strategy, like a proto meat shield strategy. So I'm guessing she probably wanted to go to the end with Aris and Terry, and then one of those two has to get voted out, and then she gets into the final.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, like, it seems like such a simple idea, just as, 3-2-1 seems like a simple idea. And maybe that's where her strength lies, is that, she's like a down-to-earth person, and she's able to just be like, hey, wait, what about this? Now, on the flip side, though, is the Eric situation, which is anything but, like a simple situation. That's insane. To think that you could do that and then do it. Amazing.
The very idea of suggesting it, I mean, even just for a laugh, it's like, okay, maybe you're going to have some fun around the campfire and suggest that. But then to actually execute that strategy and to have it be successful, and then the icing on the cake is when she gives the quick confessional as she's voting, and you can always fool them with these, and she's tapping her head. She's a star, and we knew it already from Panama, and it just solidified it with Micronesia.
Yeah, and I think like the reaction when she first proposed it is kind of like, ha 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 ha, funny story. And she's like, yeah, but no, really. What about really?
But what if?
Yeah. Now, my trademark counter to that is the reason why you can come up with an idea is because Eric Reichenbach was uniquely stupid. And,
But again, congrats to Suri for recognizing that.
No, absolutely. No, 100% to Suri. Everybody else is playing with somebody that's stupid, and they didn't come up with that idea. But, why, it may not be the greatest play of all time is because it's like figuring out if I can bounce the ball off of this moron's head, I can dunk it even better. Yeah, it kind of requires somebody to be, and it's not just that Eric is necessarily stupid, it's that he was so easily manipulated by the people he worshipped from the TV.
Yep.
But no, for a Cirie moment, absolutely it could be that. The only reason why I didn't go with that is just maybe because Panama came first. And that was kind of the moment where it was just like, not only do I love her, she is what I want out of Survivor strategists.
I mean,
and she had always been since.
And the amazing thing with Cirie is that we had a litany of things to pick from. And we specifically picked strategic moments. She's also loaded with just great fun moments, too. I mean, like, in Panama, Shane pulls her aside and pulls down his pants. He's like, what's going on down here? You're a nurse. Tell me. It's like she's just a really fun, interesting character who always provides entertainment. Like, even this season, this was not her most shining moment as far as entertainment. But even in this season, we managed to get her conversation with Michaela. There were just so many times where I was like, Cirie hasn't done it yet this season. But she's going to, because that's who she is. She's just so great to watch.
Well, even last week, where you and I both, roasted her for, probably going a little too hard in trying to use Sarah's advantage and all of that. In the end, if she had pulled that off, then she would have been in a lot better position to keep going, right?
Right.
Maybe then she actually could have gone to the end, because Michaela would still be in the game, and that is somebody who definitely wants to take her to the end. Ty's two idols wouldn't have been there to burn her. Sarah, whatever. Maybe Sarah would have been voting with Michaela then, or against Michaela then, using her advantage. But I mean, I still stand by it that it was just too much, largely because the idea that she could just go back to Sarah after stealing her vote was probably a miscalculation.
Yeah, it's probably a step too far. But as I said at the time, if anyone was going to pull it off and should have the confidence that she could pull it off, Cirie is one of those people.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes. We said at the time, somebody who could do the things that we just talked about could do that. And also just like, if it had worked, man, that could have been it. So maybe it's worth such a big shot. After burning both of his idols, one to save himself, one to save Aubrey, Ty goes ahead and votes out Aubrey the next time, like the very next day. Why?
See, my read on that was that I think Ty was perceptive enough to see Sarah as a potential winner and wanted her gone. And that was his move to get Sarah out. If you go back and look at the votes, it was 3 votes for Sarah, and he's one of them, along with Aubrey and Cirie. I think that was his move to take out Sarah as the big threat. Once she's gone, you've still got Cirie around to be a target. Aubrey's probably still a bigger target than Ty. It seems like he had a decent shot at making Final 3 if he gets Sarah out there.
Yeah, so this is the advantage of podcasting like 2 days later, is that from exit interviews, in fact, Cirie's exit interviews that they talked about, it's like or maybe it was Ty and Aubrey, one of the others, that they recognized that the votes were going to Aubrey and Ty, or at least, Aubrey most likely and possibly Ty. This would have been their ticket to get out Sarah. So from that perspective, it makes sense.
I actually hadn't even seen the exit interviews. I just kind of figured that might have been their plan.
I will say, though, that, like, just, as a story and, continuing with a lot of other things, it's just like, maybe this shows why it can be frustrating to play with Ty. Because he's just like, yeah, you and me, we're there. Oh my God, you just saved me. Everything's good. And then, why are you changing your mind, dude? Like, why? It's like trying to keep up with him. And I think a lot of that is just because he wants to please everybody. Or at the very least, he does not want to be disliked by people. And so he probably says yes a lot to people, or he won't say yes because he doesn't want to lie. And I think, for 2 seasons now, you just see that, like, that seems to be what trips him up and what gets people so angry with him. Yeah,
I think there is definitely some wishy-washiness to him. he kind of explicitly said it himself that, he feels bad about betraying people. This is not really his particular skill set. I do think, though, in this particular case, the calculus kind of changes, having not gotten Sarah out in the previous vote. So, burning your idol to save Aubrey made sense at the time. But now that you didn't get your target out, okay, now it's a different game. So the fact that he's willing to vote Aubrey out next, I don't have a problem with.
No, especially after hearing it, because I think it was less about saving Aubrey and more about getting rid of Sarah.
Yeah.
Good. And then, if you can't do it that time, and now you don't have the votes to do it next time, then, yeah, sure, get rid of Aubrey. That's fine. That works. But yeah, I think it, whether this is the perfect example of it or not, that's what made me think of it. It's just, I think Ty, it has a lot of skills as Survivor. I don't know if I'd ever want to ally with him. Yeah. Just because it's probably just too much work.
And I think part of the problem too is that even if he had been successful, he gets Aubrey out there after playing an idol to save her. Once he gets the final tribal council, I just don't know that he is able to present his case the way he would need to. Although, at least if you want to judge the ridiculous reunion votes, Aubrey was willing to vote for him.
Yeah, and I think that's very likely that Aubrey was willing to do it. I think, it's likely that Sari was willing to do it. I think it's still, it's really cute. And as much as, maybe it's frustrating that Brad kept interrupting, yeah, it is BS, and that's just dope.
Right.
And the fact that, it's like, everybody can feel well and good. For one, it's just really easy to sit there on a stage months later and be like, oh, man, well, I don't want to sit there and say I wouldn't vote for Ty. I love this guy. He's great.
Yep.
But, try to imagine Ty in that open forum where questions are coming at him all over, back and forth in different places, and then be like, you know what? I feel great about this vote. This is the one. I don't think it would have been as close as it was portrayed to be, but I'm thrilled that we finally got confirmation of what the tie was, thanks to Ty.
Yes, I will say that the one thing that actually might help him with this format change, though, is if he did have someone willing to champion his cause that could spout off, that could present a case for him better than Ty could present for himself.
That's true. But all it would take is somebody demanding, as we've seen every time some people demand the truth from Ty, and that would happen in that format. I mean, frankly, it happened in the old format too. And he just can't. It's like, so were you lying to me, Ty? Why did you say that? And then, he said it himself that sometimes he goes half thinking in his head and half speaking out loud. But, the jury members can only hear the out loud part. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he wasn't winning this season. But I think he would have gotten some votes. He votes out Aubrey after saving her. I think you've done a good job, and exits of saying that, actually, that made sense. It's time to talk about Aubrey one last time.
Yeah. Let's do the legacy thing with Aubrey. What is her defining moment?
So, last episode, we just trashed her because we're evil. And you got us in a bit of hot water by suggesting that she had no role, or, her role is exaggerated in getting Ty to flip. And people fought back on that. And I want to say, I might do a podcast with them, but we don't always agree, because I think that is her defining moment. And I think, if I'm going to guess, you were saying that because I think too many times people take Ty's own agency away from him.
Yes.
That he makes decisions. And I think that's true, that people do that. And, it was good for you to defend him in that way. But I do think that she played a big role in that. And I think it's just illustrative in this episode and many in the past is there's a way to deal with Ty, and there's a way to not deal with Ty. And a lot of people get to that not deal with Ty very well. She did it in a very good way, and frankly, sometimes better than her social interactions with some other people, both that season and this. But I remember at the time, I spent the episode before that where she voted out Debbie, just killing her. And killing the people who listened to our show, who wanted to celebrate it like it was a great victory that Aubrey had taken out an ally and left, her enemies with idols in the game. But at the time, I was like, well, I guess she could still turn it around if she could somehow flip Ty, but I don't think she can do it. And I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Her social game brought her in that moment and through to the end. And I think you saw a bit of it this time. She was able to get Ty to play her an idol again. So I think she does have, that ability to emotionally connect with people. And I felt like that scene probably highlights what her biggest strength is in Survivor. What do you got?
And I'm glad you mentioned the voting Debbie out thing, because I'm going to call that her defining moment, because I argued at the time that it was a smart play given the facts that she had. The problem was she didn't have all the facts that she needed to make a good decision there. She didn't know about the Super Idol and how it was played and what it would do. So she turned on Debbie thinking that, idols would be wasted there and then she could go after the other side in the next vote. That's not how it played out, but that's because she was operating under assumptions based on what she'd seen in every other Survivor season where there wasn't this combination Super Idol that could be played. So it was both a good move and, when you have all the facts, a bad move. It's the same sort of thing when we look back at some of the other stuff that Aubrey did in that season, voting someone out after crossing out a different name. There were, Aubrey is a great character. She has some awesome strategic moves, but at the same time, she has some stumbles. And I thought this one was like an excellent mix of both a success and a stumble in the exact same move.
All right, moving on. So Aubrey is taken out. And now Brad decides that this is, and I guess actually this might, chronologically, it happened a little bit before and it continues, that, the key to his game is that he's, and in contrast to what Aubrey did, is he's going to intimidate Ty. He's going to just lay down the law for Ty and get his way. And I think that that right there, that scene and, the thread that continued from there, that's when you see somebody losing Survivor. That's what's happening there.
Oh, yeah. As soon as we saw that, I knew it was done for him.
Oh, yeah, edit-wise, for sure. But I think, that's literally why he lost Survivor, is that, he tried to strong-arm Ty, and then just wouldn't get over it, so that he didn't do what he needed to do to win. Now, ultimately, I will say that he wouldn't have been that good a winner. And then there's other flaws in Brad's game, but, it was there for the taking. Be a little nicer to Ty, or hell, don't even be that nice to Ty, but take him to the end, and Brad Culpepper wins Survivor. But what do you think in that moment, when he's going off on Ty and just completely talking down to him, and frankly, just it's just weird gameplay, right? It's just do this, you have to do this. It's there's 3 more votes, dude. He really doesn't have to do this yet.
Right.
Was this just a screw up of somebody just kind of crumbling under the pressures of, 38 days? Or do you think that this kind of highlights what had been missing in the edit all along?
Possibly both. Brad himself admitted, that was a moment of weakness for him. He was just really frustrated, and it came out horribly. I think that's partly true, but also he condescended to Ty there to a pretty high degree, to a degree that was a little uncomfortable to watch. So I don't know if there had been other stuff that happened that wasn't quite as egregious, and this was just him laying it on a little thicker. But really, this was also just a strategic screw-up. If he had bothered to see Ty's previous season, he would know that that's not the sort of behavior that Ty is going to respond positively to. We were just talking about Aubrey, same sort of thing. Aubrey was comforting Ty. Scott and Jason were trying to strong-arm Ty. How did that work out? Brad should have known that, because he had evidence that he could look back on and known that that was a bad idea. Yeah,
see, I think he did see Ty's season. And part of that's because the way he interacted with Ty early. At the beginning of the game, better fed Brad eating, the fruit that hasn't decomposed yet and all of that. He knew how to handle Ty. He was doing it well. And apparently that wasn't the edit for, Brad Culpepper, great guy, he's going to win. I think it's for the contrast. And I actually am willing to cut him slack that this is day 38. His game had, his control over the game had fallen apart, and now he's in, kind of just the scavenger mode of I just got to keep winning, and that probably, brought more of his competitive nature out, and maybe his competitive nature isn't the best side of him. And I think the underreported story of this season, and we talked about it in comments on our website, but I don't think we ever talked about it here, is those people were really starving. They just ran out of food, and they've been eating coconuts for about a week now. And I think, he didn't have the wherewithal. He completely, fell apart mentally. He got hangry. And, he threw it all away due to that. Now, I think other people have rightly pointed out, well, other people are hungry and they're not doing that. Sure. Yeah, good for those people. That's why they win and he lost.
Yep.
But it just happens to some people. My family, I know that we don't let my wife get that way. It's just some people react different ways to different things. And I also think it's probably a reason why, he maybe did this with Ty and he wouldn't do this with Sarah, for instance, is that dealing with Ty is a little frustrating. So then he's like, you know what? I'm not going to give him a chance to think. I'm just going to do it this, which is dumb. It was a complete miscalculation. But I do think it was just an example, and we've seen it many times in this game, of somebody falling apart at the end.
Yeah, and then also making a bad read on someone else. I think he felt that his intimidation would work on Ty, and again, bad read. Whether it's because he's malnourished or whatever at this point, it's just, he blew it.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. And where he blew it even further is not taking Ty to the end. Because, as we earlier discussed, I don't think Ty was going to beat him. I mean, frankly, even in that stupid little vote, he doesn't beat him. That's how we find out the tie.
Right.
Breaker. But I don't think it was actually going to be that close. And, when we're talking about bad reads, he had a worse read in believing that he could beat Sarah. Yes. And, he's, to his credit, full on admitted, I just read the jury completely wrong. And I would also say, to be fair to him, there's been many a jury in the past where what he was thinking would have been accurate.
Yep.
Many juries in the past would not reward Sarah. Congratulations to this jury for doing so. And I think in part, the reason why they were willing to reward Sarah is speaks to Brad's other failures in this game, is that he did not develop good enough relations with people that weren't in his alliance near the end of the game. So, if they had wanted to have a protest vote because Sarah had hurt them so deeply, Brad hadn't opened the door to be that option for them, right? Like, say if Andrea just couldn't get over that way she felt, she didn't feel anything for Brad Culpepper. So, that was it. But the bigger miscalculation was not taking Ty. Where do you think this ranks amongst the disastrous decisions of the person who got to decide who went to the end?
It was pretty bad, especially because of his stated logic for doing so, being that, I'm pissed off because I never been able to trust Ty. He's always been against me, blah, blah, blah. And we have evidence of that not being the case, and the fact that Brad had previously turned on Ty and all these other things. Mm-hmm. It's, again, just not a good look for him. It's a really horrible miscalculation, and especially at that stage of the game, you can argue whether or not it cost him the million. I tend to agree with you. I think at best that goes 6-4 for Brad to win. I mean, at best for Ty, I should say.
Right.
It goes 6-4.
Ozzy was voting for Brad. It's
yes.
Cute that he did that at there, but no, he was voting for Brad.
Right. So, I mean, the only justification I could make for Ozzy doing it, which I found funny, was that Ozzy would be like, well, no, Ty beat me in a challenge, therefore Ty is good at Survivor. I'll give Ty my vote.
Yeah.
But, I think the odds are that Brad would have won probably even better than 6-4 against Ty. Partly because we've seen Ty at a final tribal council. It's not the place that he shines.
Yeah, and if we're talking about people who are having difficulty with the conditions and the starvation, Ty was as well, right? And we saw him break down a few times, and we saw that and go wrong. Near the end, the brain receptors don't fire as well when you're in those scenarios. And at peak conditioning, he has struggles in this area, both because he is an empathetic person and he responds to people's emotions, and more significantly, there is the language barrier issue that, his mind doesn't, necessarily, think in, quick, elegant English as fast as other people's. Not that, we saw a lot of evidence from Brad or Troy that they could do that in the final tribal, but that's a different discussion that we'll get to. So yeah, no, I believe that, yeah, Brad lost the game due to this decision. And where I'd say, if we're saying like what was the worst, snatching, the loss from the jaws of victory, this ranks, with the worst being at the top of the list, this ranks above all of the people who decided to bring somebody to beat them because no matter who they decided, they were going to lose anyway. So,
right.
It's worse than what, Kim Johnson did in Africa or, Lil did in Pearl Islands.
Danielle in Panama.
Yeah, Sugar in Gabon. I think there's some more recent ones. But, they were going to lose no matter who they picked, so they just picked who they wanted to lose to. So, worse than that. I'd say this isn't as bad as Colby picking Tina because, as we said, there's a reason why Brad would think that the jury would not reward Sarah, and there are reasons why they think that they would like Ty. He is an incredibly likable person. Whereas, Colby picked, the other most accomplished person in the game instead of the guy who nobody liked in Keith. And then I would say the absolute worst is Wu picking Tony instead of Cass.
Yeah.
And so I in that list, and if somebody has other examples, I think that's kind of the thing. I'd say Brad ranks third.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in line with your thinking on this one, just because Wu taking Tony to the end probably has to be number one, just because I don't really know what the argument that you make there is. I know what.
Well, you make it is the one that Tony made, right?
Yeah, I know the argument that Tony made. I just can't believe that worked.
Yeah, and to flip it, with this, why it's understandable Brad might feel the way the jury would feel that way about Sarah. You could say the same thing for Wu, except that he voted out Cass. Cass is completely hated. Cass is never winning.
Right.
I don't care if you choosing Cass turns some people against you. They can't not vote.
Yeah, exactly. They can't abstain. So, and Cass was supposedly ready and willing to make go ahead, vote for Wu, be that person argument at Final Tribal Council. But I think they still would have voted for Wu.
Well, they would have been, I'd be delighted to. Yep. Frankly, Wu, not only, lost votes. That's just because Tony was the great winner and Cass was, the great loser. But that, people were like, how the hell do you make this decision? It's insulting that you voted out Cass instead of Tony. That tells me all we need to know about why you don't deserve to win. Whereas with Colby, he almost beat her. It was obviously taking Keith would guarantee the win, but he had reason to believe I have a shot against Tina. And then there's all the other reasons why he might have made that decision. And again, I put Brad there because I understand why he thinks he could beat why he thinks he could beat Sarah. Frankly, this is as close as a vote has been in a long time. But it's still, he threw away the game and that decision. All right. So Ty, time to decide what his defining Survivor moment has been. What do you got?
I'm going to go back to Wrong and say that moment where he tells Scott and Jason, no, I'm not going to give you the idol. We're good. We're not going to use the super idol thing.
Yeah, I was going to go there too. The one reason I held back is that as far as the moment goes, his contribution is basically no.
Shaking his head.
No. Yeah, it's a little small, so, but it could definitely be it. So instead, for a definitive experience, well, there's a couple ways because there's also the delightful Ty, and maybe, we should pick one of those, but I'm going to go when Michelle owned him at Tribal Council. Because I think that just kind of shows, why Ty can't win in that. And it's and I think this is after he tried to vote her out and Aubrey wouldn't go along with it and he wasted the extra vote. Is that she just keeps attacking him in front of the jury that she will then get to vote for her. And he just can't do anything about it. Even though, he has perfectly justifiable reasons. It's I wanted you out of the game because this is Survivor and you could win. And you will win. Right. But he just couldn't do it. And you feel bad for him in that moment, but you also kind of get it. That in the complete package of Survivor players, that just isn't in him.
Yeah, and if we were going for a character moment, the very first episode of Wrong, he's tearing trees out of the ground as they're flashing up chyrons on the screen that he's this tree-loving gardener.
That is a very good one, yeah. Earlier this season, I was like, you know what, I'm kind of out on Ty. I was wrong. I like Ty on Survivor. Now I think I'm out on Ty just because it's like, I think we know how this movie will end.
Right.
But he's been a delightful character, and I was glad he's on this season. I'm glad he's been on Survivor.
Yeah, I was the same way. Earlier in this season, I was like, all right, I mean, I think we've seen what we can see from Ty. And apparently we hadn't. He had a little bit left. But now I think we've seen it all.
Yeah. I guess one more part of Ty is that a lot of people were really harping on this. And again, some of it was, as it was happening, immediate aftermath, maybe even the morning after, that Sarah, should she have taken Ty up on his idea? And I think, one thing, credit to Ty. Yeah, he figured out a way that possibly could have saved him. And the reason why he was able to figure this out is he did the exact same thing in his own season. Mm-hmm. Only he was the decision maker at that point. But should she have done the fire-making challenge to avoid the potential of going home?
I mean, from a strict numbers perspective, yes, every single time, because that's how the math works. However, I did actually see her exit interview where she claimed she knew it was going to be Ty anyway because she had, Brad had given her his wedding ring or something to prove that he wasn't going to vote her out, and Troy gave her something else as well, and so she was fairly confident that it was going to be Ty, and so in that scenario, fine, don't rock the boat, just get to Final Tribal Council. But if you're not positive, always force that tie.
Yeah, in the complete vacuum hypothetical, then yeah, it makes sense. If you are, not, super closely aligned to the immune party, then sure. But, I was arguing right away. It's like, no, I think we can probably trust that Sarah had a good read on what was going on because she had in every single moment this season, other than the time she almost, final six, which, you could, and she said herself in exit interviews, she probably took her eye off the ball a bit because she knew she wasn't going anywhere. So I was just like, I think she probably knew. I was just like, well, how do you know? You know. And now that we find, especially, she's known a lot of things. And maybe, you know what? Maybe Troy and Brad aren't that hard to read, especially at this point. So, and you're like, well, what's the risk? The risk is not having Troyzan. That's the risk.
Yeah, exactly. Because Troy is an easy 0 votes at Final Tribal, as we saw.
Whereas maybe Ty does mess it up, right? Because Brad gets Troy's vote. That's 4. Yeah, assuming he keeps the 3 that he had. Maybe Ty steals a vote, right? Maybe Michaela votes for Ty instead of Sarah. Probably not. But, just hypothetically, especially as she's sitting there doing the math. And as we previously spoke with Sari, you don't always need a majority. So, whereas, Troy's getting no votes. So that's the risk, is that you could lose Survivor because you decided to help keep Ty around on the low chance that it could be you. And you're like, well, you can't be 100% sure. Now, as we've now found out from exit interviews, holding Brad Culpepper's wedding ring makes you 100% sure. Mm-hmm. And, as a further signal to, how great Sarah played, she gave him a bracelet, that had been very important to her. She wore it through her first season. And she said, I would have voted him out if I had to. I can just go buy another bracelet. And she had one of Troy's bracelets. And frankly, she probably didn't even care that much about Troy. It's like, it's about Brad. Yeah, he's holding Monica Culpepper's wedding ring. That guy ain't voting for you 100%. But even if you don't have that level of security, what you then have to do is the math. And which is the greater percentage chance that they're going to, these people who are ranting and raving about Ty, very super angry about Ty, are actually going to vote me out? Or B, that Ty could steal enough votes away from me that I lose. And I gotta say, I think the Ty situation had a higher percentage of a chance happening than the first situation, in which case, that's why you don't do it. It's not that there's no risk. The risk is that Troy is gone. Because, frankly, you put Troy against Ty in a fire-making challenge, he loses. You put him against Sarah, who knows, one way or another. And people's point there is well, she's just going to lose anyway. So yeah, if you feel like there's a chance that it's going to be you, then of course you force the tie. I believe that Sarah knew that there wasn't a chance, and it turns out I was right there, yep. And so was she.
Absolutely.
All right, so that brings us to the final tribal council with, the aforementioned Troy, who has no chance. And it was all different. It was a change.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to the new tribal council format?
Well, Probst had mentioned stuff in pregame interviews about how he hung a lantern on it. He's pissed about the co-wrong jury and how they voted, and he doesn't ever want that to happen again. And so he's been toying with ideas that will allow them to not let that happen again. And this is what they came up with. They never laid this out. They just said that, they had some plan to prevent that from happening, specifically prevent a Michelle from winning again. So in that vein, it was at least, I thought, a little more interesting as television. It was a lot more interactive, a lot less, stilted wooden speeches from people that aren't equipped to give such speeches. A lot less retreading the same old questions over and over. So entertainment-wise, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for me, I think where it goes down, because there's some people, I think, people are divided, which makes it a good topic. And I think people have presented, solid arguments on either side. Of course, I only think the good ones are the ones that are close to mine. Mm-hmm. I think it is a downgrade from what Final Tribal Council is supposed to be. However, it's a massive improvement of what Tribal Council actually has become. Because Tribal Council is not what it's supposed to be. The people who are against this change have been arguing that it's supposed to be this. It has not been that in a very long time, if it ever was in the first place. Tribal Council has largely just been a televised experience. I don't think a lot of decisions have been made there. And I think as the years have gone by, we've talked about it. We talked about it probably last season. We talked about it in Go Wrong. That it's just a farce at this point, right? Yeah. The point where they just kept stripping things away from it because they realized it was a waste of time. No more closing statements. You know what? Frick it. No more opening statements. And as it goes on, it didn't even have much entertainment value. And I think that's where some people are like, well, this will rob us of that. This will rob us of, we'll never get the Heidi moment or this moment. It's like, you're not getting those anymore. The last great, Final Tribal Council moments are probably fairly old, or maybe there's some recent ones, but all they are is a rehash of old ones. Yep. This is why we had a quiz the day of where it was like, what Final Tribal Council voter question are you? Because there's there aren't that many different kinds of Final Tribal Council performances. Emily thought there was about 3. I at least got her to bump it up to 5. I would suggest there's probably maybe 6 or 7, but there still isn't that much. And through 34 seasons, it's like, oh, this one, okay, they're going to do that again. And it got to the point where I just didn't want to see it anymore. Even, some people are like, oh, it was a great, wasn't that a great performance by Shireen? And I like some of it. I definitely like that she finally got to, tell one of the people off. But also, it was just a pastiche of Susan Hawk. And, this is not even a knock on her because this is what everybody was doing. It was just blatant grandstanding. And I feel like, because that's what Final Tribal Council become. That's what Reed was doing, and I kind of hated it. Mm. It's what, a lot of people have done that. And I think this does away with it. And there'll still be some grandstanding, but other grandstanders get to interrupt you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing here is you allow some jurors to go purple, which is interesting because there are some people that are going to get talked over because they're not influential, even on the jury, or they're just otherwise not interesting, even on the jury. So we got barely any of Haley or Sierra. We did get some very loud vocal Debbie, some Ty, I'm sorry.
We got a little bit of Ty.
A little Ty. I was going to say Zeke though.
Yeah.
Basically the people that are willing to do the sorts of things that they would have done in the old format, go out there and make it all about themselves. No, my opinion really matters here. Listen to me. So, those people get to overshadow some of the more silent types.
Yeah, and I think there's some people factored that into some of their criticism because maybe they're just nice people who want everybody to have a chance. I guarantee you, in the old format, you would not remember or give a crap about what Haley or Sierra had to say. All right? They every Final Tribal Council have people that, They just kind of get up there and, well, whatever. They ask some form of maybe even a question that was already asked. And when Fishback talked about this on Know-It-Alls with Sophie, he was like, yeah, most jurors don't even listen to the other jurors. All you're doing is running your own speech over and over in your head until it's your time to speak. And then, when you get done, you're like evaluating your performance. So like that's how farcical Tribal Council had become. And as we said, like how many votes had ever changed hands? Not many, and definitely not recently. Well, that's why we kept getting sweeps lately, is because the jurors are like, I don't care. We all decided this a long time ago. I think this prevents that. Now, will it, 100% change people's minds? Maybe not, but at least it'll feel like jurors are engaged.
Yeah.
All we got from Haley was like, oh, yeah, like she was noticing and listening, and maybe she was factoring some stuff in. I feel like the people... Yeah, I think another criticism of it is like, well, it becomes more about the jurors than the speakers. That's what Tribal Council has become 100%.
Yes.
Most people lately hadn't even been asking questions. Not even like the way where you just kind of like maybe uptick your voice at the end so your statement sounds like a question. There hadn't been any of that. It had been like doing a podcast with me.
So the one worry that I have about this is that, Probst is like, oh, we're going to decide it by these categories that are how you win Survivor, which is a total like BS staging prop type thing. The one worry that I have is that, Probst does not need to get too aggressive and active in determining a winner. I do like that it causes people to be a little more open with their justification, to get a little more passionate about who they're voting for. The worry that I have, and I didn't feel like it happened here, but the worry that I have is that in future seasons, Probst might be like, hey, person who's defending the winner that I would like to see, talk to us for a moment about your reasoning. That kind of stuff. Shutting down someone else's conversation to move it to someone who's making a point that he likes.
No, that's absolutely something to be concerned about. It's something that the show needs to watch. I think, as you said, like the formatting of this and that, and, the show's constant desire to make their, logo have meaning. Those are things to be worked on. I don't think you need that format. You might need just a little bit to keep things moving or get things started. And I do think, Probst needs to have some level of moderation to, most especially, ensure that every once in a while it goes to the people being judged in front of the jury. Hey, let's give them a chance to speak here. And B, to, toss the ball to everybody. But this is what he does every week, right? So it's like, and does he influence it in all those other situations? Yeah, probably. And maybe it'll just become that kind of scenario, just like Tribal Council every week when we're figuring out who gets voted out. Probst becomes a tool to use. Intentional. He becomes the one that, the jurors themselves that are trying to, curry favor and win influence. They can use him. The people sitting there can use him. They can, use him to shut some other people down. And it becomes more of a discussion. And the worry is that, he's going to help Coach beat Sophie or something like that. Frankly, she felt like that was a worry even in the old format. Hey, Coach, are you sure you don't have any more final words you want to give? Although, frankly, letting Coach speak more was not going to help his situation. That is something that they need to be careful of. Obviously, the other the caution there is, just as every final Tribal Council and every Tribal Council always, we don't see the whole story. So there will be seasons where people are like, oh, he totally influenced the jury. And, after some time we'll come back and be like, hey, they probably edited it. The sequences that made the winner look better because they were the winner. Mm-hmm. So we saw Probst talk more in there than he did in the other ones. And B, that jury probably had already decided before they got out there. Because I still don't know if this will do much to influence who wins or loses. As we started the conversation and as Probst started the conversation, that this was like, anti-Michelle measure. I think probably the most likely scenario coming out of Korong, if they had this there, is she still wins. But the reason for winning is maybe just a little less mysterious, or that jury gets to hide a little less. And that's what I like about it more, is that they will get challenged. They need to say more than just their pre-planned 3-minute speech, and then they go back and sit down because they would always intended to vote for Michelle in the first place. So I am a huge fan of this change. I think Final Tribal Council went from like just this perfunctory rehash of a rehash of a rehash of everything we'd ever seen before to something that, at least for the next little while, should actually be like interesting television again.
Yeah, until they manage to break this one too. But for now, I'm behind it. And my initial gut reaction was, no, what are you doing? You're going to lose some classic moments. By the time this jury was done, I was like, no, I judged too soon. It's fine.
Yeah, we got some moments. So let's talk about this one specifically. Who do we think performed well? Who, was Sarah, between Sarah, Brad, and Troy? Troy.
So I can eliminate one of those options, just like the jury did. Sarah did fine, but again, it's, as you said, we're basing this on an edited version of that tribal council. So, of course, we saw Sarah doing well and Brad doing poorly. Those things actually did happen, though. I mean, Brad legit didn't know enough about Michaela. Brad definitely had bullied Ty, and Ty was actually putting it out there to everybody that Brad didn't seem like he knew the way he was treating people. All important things to show us as a viewer as to how these votes were going to go. But I think even taking that all into account, Sarah did very well. I mean, she justified her moves very well. She convinced Michaela very quickly that she was deserving of Michaela's vote by saying, hey, did you notice that there was an advantage by your foot? No, you didn't, but I did, and I got it, and I used it, and that was the thing that ended up getting you voted out. And Michaela was just like, oh, you did? That's insane. Good job. Great move. And, if she wasn't already locked in for Sarah, at that point she was.
Yeah, no, I thought Sarah did really well. Yeah, and the caveats you put there. The other caveat to always remember when people are judging who did well at Final Tribal Council is it's a lot easier when the jurors clearly like you. So it's like, oh, Cochran had a great performance. Yeah, it's probably easier to answer questions when it was like, how would it be to hang out with me in the bar versus show me your teeth? So yeah, it's always just like that. So, because Brad also I don't think did very well, but I think a part of that is because he came to the realization, oh, I just lost. I lost. They're like, and he said in his exit, as soon as Zeke was like, and you did that, and you betrayed me, and it hurt me, and thus I will champion you to win. And I think Brad at that moment was like, I just made a big mistake.
Yep, the Joe Bluth moment.
Yeah, but I think Sarah did well, and I think that shows that this format isn't killing anything for the competitors because she made sure to go through all of the things that she wanted to talk about in a way that I feel contestants really haven't had that much opportunity. It's the fact, and we've talked about this. If you're waiting for the question that's going to help you make your case, you might as well, you might wait the whole time because it might not ever come. So even within Prope's, structure, she took over one that, wasn't completely related, but she made sure that people knew this is where I excelled. And I think, her analogy of going undercover, I think that really rang true with people. Like, oh, okay, I get it. That's why you can do this, and it's not because you're a horrible person. It's because you're practiced, and this game is like going undercover. I think she spoke to well. I think she connected with everybody, much like everything this season. It was a very shrewd and very well played performance by Sarah that still wasn't particularly interesting, but frankly, probably a little bit more interesting than say Someone for Confessional. So I thought she did really well. Brad did not do well at all. The best arguments for Brad came from other people. Actually, just person, because Debbie's arguments were horrible. To the point where Brad might have been like, Debbie, ixnay on the elp me.
Yep. And Ozzy's argument was essentially, hey, you won challenges like I did. So,
Ozzy obviously isn't the greatest speaker, but I do feel like, especially because he had a chance to do it more than once, right? If he just got up there, he would have done the same thing. Everybody should know that this is so great because he was like me. But he was able to speak on it later that, you know what? It's actually not easy for an alpha male to go through this game because you guys kind of want to take us out all the time. He was able to do that, and that is something to be respected. So I actually, I kind of felt what Ozzy was saying in that moment. And yeah, it's funny because all he's doing is voting for himself. Well, guess what? That's how Survivor juries work. That's all Zeke was doing. That's all Michaela was doing. People vote for themselves. And to Sarah's credit, she made sure more people felt like she was them.
Indeed, she did.
Yeah, and I agree. Like I said, I thought Zeke did what he was going to do. I feel like having to mix it in with other people made it less obnoxious. So I'm a big fan of this format, and I think it played off well here. I look forward to seeing how people can play with it until, as you say, they break it too. So let's go through the finalists. I know people have been waiting for this all season. Can't wait. You to talk about what Troy's defining Survivor moment is. So before we do that, I'll just get mine out of the way and then step back. It's this is my island. And I know you've laid out a case of why that was stupid, because it was, and why it wasn't that big a deal, because it wasn't. However, it's all he got, man. Like 100%, Troy Robertson has been was put on a list to be voted back and was brought back this time, and I suppose apparently considered for other seasons because he yelled after winning a challenge one time. If he doesn't do that, he is just, completely forgotten as a guy who, not once but twice in his season kowtowed to the more charismatic figure, first Colton, then Kim. But because that time he showed his backbone, he won a challenge and let out a primal scream, apparently that means he gets to come back on Survivor. What do you have?
Yeah, I mean, that is the actual moment. I would define that as a negative moment because of, you remember the "this is my island" part. There's much more to that because right after that, he starts telling off all the people that he would potentially need to work with or vote for him at the end. It was horrifically bad as far as a Survivor move. But, because I'm not a Troy fan, why not this? The moment where he doesn't get selected to go on Cambodia. That's Troy's defining moment. When he's sitting in the audience and finds out he's not going. That's it.
Oh, man. He's going to block you twice.
Oh, I'm so pissed that it's not such an exclusive club anymore that, I got to do something to separate myself from the pack here.
I suppose the other argument is, and then why this could work is because it wasn't actually done by him at all, is, Malcolm telling the world that he's got a big penis. That could be it. Because now when we're talking about Troy, because frankly, he was this, purple nothing for most of the season, to the point where it's so easy, like, pitiable. You'd be like, yeah, but apparently he packs a lot of heat. So there's that.
He's not just a purple nothing, he's a purple-headed warrior.
There you go. Green monster. All right. Moving on to the second place finisher of the season, what do you have for Brad's defining Survivor moment?
Oh, this one's so easy. F you, Brad Culpepper.
See, I think that was definitely his one going into this season. But my one counter is this is his better season, right? And this should be what defines. And is that his moment, or is that Marissa's moment or Candace's moment?
It's the top of mind whenever you hear Brad Culpepper. I think even after this performance, that's the one I'm going to think of.
And I think where you can justify that is he in the show is doing all of this to build his reputation back, build it up to the point where, maybe it was a racing FU Brad Culpepper, and then it came crashing down at the end, which is where I am at. And fortunately, because I actually do kind of like the guy, and I think he played all right. As I say, he played well enough to win a season of Survivor. I think it was his meltdown with Ty at the end of the season. Unfortunately, all of the goodwill he'd been doing, all the work, in the end, he was still the spaz that we remember from Blood versus Water. Apparently, the spaz that people saw in the airport on the way to this season. Apparently, no matter how hard he works, it came out there, and it would be tough to wipe that away, because it's also why he lost Survivor.
Yeah, and I think we had discussed coming into the season, I never really had anything against him, despite the FU Brad Culpepper moment. I remember saying at the time, he's fine for what he was. He had a decent strategy in that season. The thing is, it's just he's, much like Sarah, not really all that engaging of a television presence. He's not really a huge strategic mastermind. He's not all that fun to watch. He would have been fine as a winner, but it's not anything I would have been, encouraging Survivor fans to go watch.
And as we actually said earlier this season, actually, there's probably ways he could pop off the screen. He did in moments in Blood versus Water. Problem is, all of those prevent him from winning Survivor. So in order to do well, he had to like taper all that in. Mm-hmm. And when he was doing well, he was, and that wasn't very interesting. And then it came out. And then frankly, that wasn't interesting either because it was just kind of not something we wanted to see. It was kind of like, oh man, don't be like that. So that's why I think that's his defining moment. And let's move on to the winner. And before we talk about her legacy, let's talk about her game. How well do you think that Sarah did this season? Where does her, winning game kind of rate?
Yeah, pretty highly because it was really impressive. There was some elements of Tony's game in there, which she pointed out at the reunion, where, by the way, I should point out, she also... she referred to herself as Sarah, the way that Tony talks about her, which I thought was a nice little touch. Again, it's just Sarah knowing people. She's just won the million, and she's still going to throw some credit at Tony and show that they still have a bond, even though it means nothing at this point.
Yeah, and I think actually Probst did a good job of like when she kept going, like, and this was actually probably her most engaging when she was being Tony. It was like, no, your first segment probably shouldn't be about Tony. Let's get back to you, and right. Answer her another question.
But I think in general, just the things that she did, the relationships that she utilized, that she flipped on, the advantage that she got by manipulating Sierra. By trading on a relationship with Sierra. All impressive things, but as we discussed for several episodes this season, it's just slightly tarnished by the fact that she doesn't sell it as well as she should.
Yeah, I think she played one of the all-time greatest games. And frankly, you could put it up there with anyone's individual game. And I mean that like the greats, like Kim or something. Like there's not, the few minor missteps she could have taken, she was able to, correct for, which is generally what happens in Survivor, It's a myth that people will not, play perfectly or not, need some kind of twist of luck. But yeah, it wasn't compelling enough. And I worry that like two things will happen as a result of this. One, some people will just underrate it, his game because, she didn't interest them. They weren't rooting for her. And then two, some people will just end up championing her too hard. Because it's like, oh, I understand. I can follow the real truth. So I'm a big Sarah fan. And it's like, both of you guys are wrong. All right. So like, yeah, her game needs to be celebrated. It was, frankly, like unbelievable in many ways. Like the fact, like I did not believe that somebody could do what she was able to do, which is so easily and without fallout, flip between sides, go, back and forth with just herself. Like Rob Cesternino flips back and forth. He brings people with him to,
yeah, same with Tony.
Take some of the flame. Yeah. Yeah. And, like, she didn't go to the end with those people either, that's the other way. It's like, well, go to the end with people with as much blood on their hands as you do. They didn't really have much. Like, Troy had no blood on his hands, unless he'd cut himself that day. So it was just like, yeah, it was a phenomenal game, but she still isn't one of the great Survivor characters of all time. And, she can, dry her eyes on her $1 million check for that. I think one thing that like just really helped her this season, positively, because I think one like maybe slight is she's able to do those things because she never had a target that so many people this season had.
Right.
But good for her for using that. I think she probably knew that going in and was able to work that way. But she's the only player I think this entire season who is allowed to work with both sides or with more than one side. We recognize this like in the in the pre-merge, and I think it continued throughout. People were very rigid this season. It's like, this is my tribe, this is my group, and we're going to go against the others. And there wasn't really any commingling. At the end, you got a bit with Ty flipping, and that cost him, right? But when Zeke tried to do it, it cost him both in the game and public opinion. Sarah could work with anybody. And that's a strength for her ability to do that, and her ability to do that without taking any heat for it. Nobody seemed to resent that Sarah was able to vote one way, and then, vote another way. That, they were just like, hey, come on back to us. It's great. Oh, you want to go talk to those people over there? That's cool. Whereas anybody else who tried to do it this season seemed to be punished for it.
Yeah, and it might just be that she was using being underestimated as a shield to do that. But again, the fact that she could recognize that she could, utilize that is a good thing on her part. It shows that she has some perception of what's going on and how she's being perceived by the other people around her.
So yeah, I'm glad she won. It wasn't obviously somebody I was cheering for in an excited way, and there would have been some small satisfaction if she lost, just due to the smugness of people who recognized that she would win. A secret that apparently was out there in week 2 from spoilers. So you, listener, were not somebody who was spoiled, but they were out there, and just take note. And so, I'm glad because, frankly, for the past couple winters, I've been in a bit of a, place where it's like, man, can great players win anymore? Because, I guess that's where I emotionally swing. Apparently, yes, because I think she was easily the best player this season. Normally at this point, we would talk about what the winner's best move was. For me, that also kind of folds into the other question we've been answering all season, which is what is their defining moment? How about yourself?
This one was tough just because, obviously, or I should say, it should come from this season. This was by far her better season, and I don't know what you would pick from Cagayan that would compete. So the thing is, I ended up deciding that comforting Zeke was in the Zeke aftermath and the way she handled that. That, to me, is how I'm going to remember Sarah, despite all the excellent strategic and social moves that she made in this season.
That's a good pick. Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought about that. And, if you look at her exits in her, I think that continues to this day. And not just in the, hey, people should be proud of me and my family for not thinking I'm an awful monster or anything like that. Which I actually think that moment in the reunion has multiple interpretations.
Yeah, sure.
So that maybe she wasn't worried that people would judge her for being human to somebody, but they would judge her new friend.
Yes.
But even there, that's still that's still not great, it's still the low bar of congratulations that they could treat somebody nicely. But no, yeah, that was a really good moment. I hadn't thought of that because I went with a gameplay moment. Getting Sierra to tell her about her advantage is that won her the game, right?
Yeah.
That is just amazing, and it's just so indicative of what Sarah was good at, because she had just voted against Sierra's interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
And voted out Debbie, turned on the whole alliance. And yet, Sierra had been working with Brad every day in this game since the first day. They were joint decision makers all the way through, and yet somehow in that moment Sierra confesses her big secret that she's kept since the opening minutes of the game, that she hasn't told any of her closer alliances, because as Sierra said, I never intended to do that, and I regretted it as soon as I did. But apparently that's the way that Sarah was able to work with people, and that's amazing. And then when you add, and this probably splits a moment up, but that Sierra gave her after all of that, this is unheard of. And sure, at the end, Sierra didn't vote for her, but Sierra had already done her part. A vote might have been a little bit extra. Sierra already gave Sarah the key to winning this game. So that I think is her defining moment, and I also think that was her best move this season.
Perfectly reasonable reasonable move to land on. All right, so speaking of this season, let's rank. Well, we shouldn't rank it. We should just say approximately. We'll get to actual season rankings very soon. We got to do our updating of our season ranking list, which you can find on our website. But
we should make that post look better this summer.
We should. Not me. Not it.
Oh, okay. Let's get our designer on that one.
Yeah. So just ballpark. Where are you thinking this is going to rank? Is this a top 10? Is this a bottom 10? Is it somewhere in between?
It's easily lower third. I mean, think of a season that we've been like this kind of blah on for so long. It's just, as great a game as Sarah played, she deserved to win this. She was better than anybody else. A final four of Sarah, Brad, Troy, and Ty, and Aubrey at final five, but she's barely on this season. It's just, and there's a lot of reasons for it, and people, that's all we've been talking about for a few weeks, so that I think also suggests why it's not a great season. I think ultimately it's just kind of like, man, it's just a lot of things converge to not make this good. I think the biggest one is casting, and that's the one area they need to work on, but that just happens sometimes. Sometimes it's just like a good cast coalesces, or it doesn't, and that defeats the season. I'd say for this one, they had some data on these players to the point where they probably should have recognized the potential issues, but like we didn't. We thought like, there's so many more good players and interesting characters than bad, and we were the ones to poo-poo the negativity that like recent All-Star seasons haven't been like this. It hasn't been what All-Stars was. But it turns out that the mix was wrong.
Yep.
Well, how about yourself?
It's definitely going to be in the bottom half for me. I just haven't really decided how low it's going to go. The thing is, it had some really great, well-done episodes. The season as a whole just didn't land with me. I mean, there was a lot of great moments along the way. As I said, there was, Michaela was a star. Sandra was a queen for 6 episodes or whatever it was. There were definitely some highlights here. It's just, if I'm looking at the full season, I can't rank it too high.
Yeah, and I think the season will be held up by us for a long time now as an example of why people shouldn't get too hype about, how good a preseason is for a season. I'm very like, that season can't be very good. The preseason was too predictable.
Pre-merge.
It's like, pre-merge, yes. Preseason wasn't very, preseason was great. Love preseason.
Exactly. I love the preseason. I want to go back to that.
Go back and look at our coverage. The pre-merge, it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing when like the people you are less interested in go home first. That's kind of the ideal scenario. Stories that end well are much better than stories that begin well. And this, I think, had a really exciting pre-merge. And all that ended up meaning was that the parts that matter were far less interesting.
Exactly. Which is going to significantly hamper its chances in our rankings.
All right, so I think that is enough on this season. If you have any other topics to discuss, whether it's things we failed to discuss, things from earlier this season, or just things that you are upset that we said tonight, you can do so on our website, and that's purplerockpodcast.com. And it's a great place to hang out, and what we're going to do now is what we do at the end of every season, which is thanking the people that make it so great.
And me going to get a water rake.
So first, we should talk about the other people who work on the site with us. Big thank you to Mark, who helps the site actually look semi-professional, a thing that we ruin whenever we take over the visuals or frankly write things on it. Thank you to Emily for her different posts this season, quizzes. She led off the season with a podcast and, just being an overall, brand ambassador. It's, unfortunate that like I do this every week and like I'm probably, easily the third best known person of this website.
What's funny is I misheard that and I thought you were calling her a Brandon Bass. I was like, what? Anyway.
Solid 6'9", center.
I love that we managed to work in random NBA references. Okay, continue.
We almost missed it. Thank you to Matt, who does our live blog every week. And we don't insult enough, so we're going to work on that in future seasons. And thank you also, not a full-on staff member, but thank you to Taco from TP, I believe is his
good luck.
Super nerdy name, who near the end of the season took over to make a weekly bonus video post because he was doing it in comments anyway, and I think he's been doing a bang-up job for something that I once tried and completely quit on. So thank you for doing that. I think it's been a nice little fun addition. Thank you to Kemper Boyd for her ongoing Survivor New Zealand coverage, at least for now. I think it's probably like a teetering thing every week, but she's still doing it. And if you're watching that season of Survivor, feel free to comment. That's why those posts exist. If you were looking to scratch an itch for Survivor, you could probably catch up now that the good version's done. And also now, thank you to the people who comment on our site all the time, because I do believe that is what makes our site unique and, frankly, maybe better than other places. I mean, okay, I think it's me and then this. That it is a place that you could just kind of come hang out with some funny, cool people who will discuss Survivor in a less obnoxious way, or at least in an obnoxious way that we like.
Right. The obnoxious ways we prefer.
That's right. So thank you to Barbara Anderson, Sharkules, Hornacek, Elisa Swift, Assistant Dragon Slayer, Diego Armando, Blurry Denzel, Guis, Other Scott, Saturday Night Palsy, Dr. Van Nostrand, Mike Hirsch, Roswolf, Violina23, Corndog Shuffle, Ms. Sweater Fan, Pretty Boy Probst, The Sky is Falling, Max Jet, Super Duper Fan, Rhea, Emin Scout and BK, who also wrote a post for us this year and did a live blog, Indescribable Hat, Storm of Cuteness, Jersey Luck, Figaro, Side Character Forever 1267, Ms. Wooza, Nearly Nina, Ms. Fjordstone, Pufflehuff, Scarlet 3639, Maritimer, Hardcore Umlaut, HBO CEO of Family Podcast, Vagabond, Wonderand, Alcanara, Streets Ahead, Purple Tally, Bundy, Ryan Bilger, Prom King, Ethan Kyle, Parvati's Two Idols, Adam B, XL Pelican, Token Teens, Head Architect Sylvia, Cinnamon Owl, Neutral Username, Bad Player 91, Georgios, something quirky, and Hurley Tennis. And if I have not said your name, you just don't matter. No, it's because you probably didn't comment in the past two posts, and that's basically all the homework I do. But thank you to everybody who makes our site a good place. Where's that again, John?
That would be purplerockpodcast.com, which you should know by now because it's such a good site. And somehow we have absurd numbers of people coming to it that we never envisioned 3 years ago.
We're still going to do stuff on the off season. We don't have it all formulated, and John and I are probably not going to do a lot of it to start, but to wrap this season up, we will do a list of the best moments. As I said, Kemper Boyd's coverage will continue, and we're going to do some kind of rewatch, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, don't keep an eye out for much stuff from me because I could really use a break at this point.
But maybe you'll share the odd thought on your Twitter account, which is
Purple Rock John. And of course, you can find Andy's at Purple Rock Andy. And if you want the show's account, it's Purple Rock Pod.
The other members of our site are Purple Rock Emma, Purple Rock Matt, Purple Rock Mark. A victory for branding everywhere. You can subscribe to the podcast, and that would include rewatches at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. You can email the show, purplerockpodcast@gmail.com, and let's finish this off with some theme music.
That's what it's like when a woman wants a baby.